हेलो स्टूडेंट्स, टुडे विल बी डिस्कस अबाउट ऑगस्टन एज। आज का हमारा टॉपिक है ऑगस्टन एज। द टाइटल द पीस ऑफ द ऑगस्टन्स इज अप्लाइड टू द एज ऑफ ड्राइडन एंड पोप। ये जो एज है वो ड्राइडन और पोप की मानी जाती है। जॉर्ज सैंड्सबरी रोट अ बुक द पीस of the Augustans in which he described the history of the Restoration and the 18th century literature. The restoration of monarchy in England marked the beginning of the Augustan Age, which in England marked the beginning of Augustan Age, which flourished in the age of Pope. The coming of Charles II to the throne of England was compared to the restoration of Augustan Caesar in Rome in 30 BC, Dryden wrote. Next, the Augustan Age in Roman history. The region of Augustus Caesar is known as the Golden Age in Roman history. This age is often compared with the age of Louis XIV in France and the region of Chandragupta II in Indian history. The Augustan Age witnessed an all-round development in art and literature, trade and commerce, which brought in lasting peace and prosperity in its wake. In literature, it was an age of Virgil, Horace, and Ovid. In the 44 years of his reign, he reshaped the Roman world and recognized the Roman state to ensure the peace he had made. It was a God who gave us this peace, cried the countryman in Virgil. Augustus not only adjusted the disharmonies of the body politic of Rome, not only gave us this peace after the dissolution of the civil war, he laid the foundation of the continuing calm. His work endured for long. Rome kept the world at peace, teaching as Virgil and had claimed she should law government in the nations. There are wars, but compared to the wars of the Republic, they were few and on the fringe. There were civil upheavals, but none of great consequence during the first 2 centuries AD 68-9, during which the generals of three armies fought for the throne vacated by the fallen. Nero left little imprint on the century that followed. Next, 18th century England as the Augustan Age in literature. 18th century in England was the self-styled Augustan Age, that is, an age equal to the age of Augustus Caesar, when Roman society had reached a highest peak of glory than ever before or after. The name Augustan Age was chosen by the writers themselves, who saw in Pope, Addison, Swift, Johnson, and work the modern parallels to Horace, Virgil's Caesarea, and all the brilliant company who made Roman literature famous in the days of Augustus. The optimism of the 18th century meant the belief of England were looked upon as barbarous, and the classic of Greece and Rome were regarded as the model which all men of taste were to follow. They were classist in the sense that they imitated the literary forms of the ancients. Their subject matter was always the life of their own times. Next, an age of peace and prosperity. After the restoration of monarchy in 1660, England saw an era of apparent peace and prosperity. No doubt, there were no such social calamities and upheavals as the Black Death of 1348, the Great Fire of London 1616, the Glorious Revolution of 1688, The Dutch Wars, the 7 Year War, England marched on the road of peace and prosperity, giving balanced social picture of the first half. The 18th century, E. Albert remarks, after the succession of the House of Hanover, the first half of the 18th century was a period of stabilization and steadily growing wealth and prosperity. The evils of the approaching industrial revolution had not yet been realized, and the country, still free from any suggestion of acrimonious rule in which local government rested on the squires. This middle way of control and region and the distrust of enthusiasm are faithfully reflected in an literature of this period. It was an age in which the sense of propriety and restraint of a few was offset by widespread self-indulgence and excess, an age of material greed, of spiritual lassitude, of wild speculation in the stock markets, of ruinous gambling in clubs and private houses, of crime and debauchery, of brutality, and scholars such as Fielding fought against both as magistrate and as writer, and Hogarth exposed in paintings, in engraving, wrecks and harlots and skin sudden poor. Next, an age of classism or new classism in literature. In the works of Dryden and his followers, we see a revival of classism in effort to make English literature conform to rules established by the great writers of other nations. They demand that poetry should follow exact rules, and in this they were influenced by French writing, especially by Boileau and Rapin, who insisted on precise methods of writing poetry and who professed to have discovered their rules in the classics of Horace and Aristotle. Pope laid down as a final test of excellence. The Elizabethans had also drawn upon the ancient word. They used their grains freely and joyously, bending the work of the classical authors to their own wills. But in the age of Dryden and of Pope, they adhered to the rules as they found them. The school of Dryden was loath to alter. The age of Pope abandoned freedom altogether. Pope put in this memorable couplet. Next, the dominance of the heroic couplet. The heroic couplet consists of two iambic pentameters rhyming together. It is called heroic because it was the usual form for epic verse in English. Celebrating heroic exploit, it had also been used verse in English for native satiric descriptive drama, polemics and exposition. It was first introduced in English celebrating by Chaucer in the Canterbury Tales. The tradition was passed on to the Elizabethans by the Scottish poet Harry in his Bolus. Marlowe used it in his Hero and Leander in the 17th century, the heroic couplet used by Edmund Waller and Dryden, and it attained a perfect finish in the hands of Pope. The apogee of the heroic couplet was reached in the Augustan Age of English literature, and Pope was unrivaled in the use of the heroic couplet. He made his lines as epigrammatic as it was possible. In the hands of Pope, heroic couplet acquired an incomparable effectiveness. Next, an age of prose and satire. The new classical age was primarily an age of prose. Though Dryden was a poet and dramatist of repute, he was still greater as a writer of prose. He was the first great modern prose writer, as also the first great modern critic. In Dryden's time, prose begins definitely to find its feet. It acquires a general utility and a permanence. It is smoothed and straightened. simplified and harmonized. This is the age of average prose and prepares the way for the work of Swift and Addison, who stand on the threshold of the modern prose style. The age of Pope intensified the movement that began after the Restoration. The Pope was a poet, yet in his poetry we find the characteristics of good prose, neatness and perspicuity in uniformity and balance, age and point in style and correctness in technique. Rossetti said that Pope's was prose style twisted into words, and Matthew Arnold declared that Dryden and Pope were the classics of prose and not of poetry. That Dryden and Pope were the classic of prose and not of poetry. The other great writers of the age were all prose writers of eminence. Swift, Defoe, Addison, and Steele wrote a type of prose which is still held in high esteem. The graceful elegance of Addison's essays, the terse vigor of Swift's satires, the artistic finish of Fielding's novels, the sonorous eloquence of Gibbon's history and of Work's orations, these have no parallel in the poetry of the age. Indeed, poetry itself prosaic in this respect, that it was used not for creative works of imagination but for essays, for satire, for criticism, for exactly the same practical ends as was prose. Besides the development of modern prose, the age of Pope was remarkable for the rise of the periodical literature and the growth of the essay. Satire was also a characteristic product of the early 18th century. It was cultivated both in poetry and prose. Okay, thank you for watching.